everybody, and welcome to the Healing Power of Laughter, presented by the Phoenix Society as part of the World Burn Congress this year, 2023, live and in person. We're not live and in person today, we're videotaping, but hello and welcome for those of you who are watching this in the future. My name is Josh Gropper, and this session, The Healing Power of Laughter, is a passion project, a brainchild of mine from, gosh, maybe 10 years ago. Or I've been pitching it to the Phoenix Society, and luckily enough, they've accepted it and adopted it, and we're now happy to be part of the World Burn Congress. The genesis of this idea is I am brought to the burn community through my brother Danny, who's a burn survivor. I'll let him and the others introduce themselves in a second. But what I've observed during my 30 or so years being Danny's brother is that Danny brings this amazing sense of humor to everything that has an effect on others, where first and foremost, it takes the elephant out of the room. It makes people feel more comfortable. It's a bonding thing. And I wanted to do this seminar because I wanted to showcase his gifts and his talents with an eye towards helping others. So that was the genesis of this. I will say at the beginning, before I turn it over for introductions, that this seminar may not be for everyone. If you are new in your journey as a burn survivor, if the wounds, both physically and emotionally, are still very raw, if you're not ready to laugh, we get that, we understand that, and this might not be the right seminar for you. And I would urge you to tune out. And when you are ready, when you are at that point on the journey, that you, at that point, revisit it. We don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. The humor is very PG. We're not looking to hurt anybody. It's meant to help people. We'll drill down a little bit more into that. So I don't think you're going to hear anything particularly offensive. But if you're just at the beginning of your journey and not ready for this seminar, this is my lawyerly caveat to maybe think about going to another seminar and coming back to this when you're a little further along. So that being out of the way, let me just take a moment to ask each of our participants, starting with my brother Danny, just briefly introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we will move on from there. Before I turn it over to you, Dan, though, I guess maybe I should just name everybody because I'm so grateful that you guys have decided to take part in this. Not only do we have Danny today, but we have Amy Pakes, who is not only a nurse, but she ran the entire burn unit out on Long Island, where Danny was able to heal. And we're so fortunate to have her here, as well as Mickey Rothbauer, who comes to us from the Midwest and can give us the mental health perspective. We're so welcoming of her and so grateful to have her. And in general, again, I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm going to give you an opportunity. In general,
we're out of time.
The bare bones outline of this is Danny and I'll banter a little bit so you get a sense of the comedy and what it does. Amy's going to provide us with the medical perspective from the medical community, how she's observed personally, not only Danny, but others, and how they've used humor to help them heal. And then Mickey's going to talk about, what's really going on underneath. What's the subtext? What's happening when someone's making a joke and someone's laughing, and what that's doing to the joke teller, the joke recipient, the room, etc. So we've got tons of different perspectives, and I've said enough. I'm going to shut up. Danny, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Josh. Yes, as Josh said, my name is Dan Gropper, Josh's brother, and I was in a fire back in 1989. I don't know how long ago that was. I was promised there would be no math, but I think it's in the range of 34 years ago. It was touch and go for a while. They didn't think I would make it. 78% of my body was burned, I believe. Lost both my hands below the elbow, both my legs above the knee. So I've got the burn jokes, I've got the amputee jokes, I've got them all. But yeah, it was not a laughing matter at that time. And as Josh said, it takes a while for you to laugh and get comfortable. And that's the main thing I wanted to tell people with this, wanted to come across, is people, should, it's not about how funny you are. It's about being able to laugh and making people feel comfortable. You said the elephant in the room. It's a touchy subject. People aren't used to burn survivors. So if you're joking around about it, it puts people at ease. It puts you at ease too. It puts other people at ease. And yeah, that's the main point I want to get across.
Great,
and
great.
We'll have jokes later. One of them is, I used to be 6 feet. Now I'm 4 feet. I lost 2 feet. So it's stuff like that that gets people going. It gets the crowd going. I'll let the others introduce themselves.
That's great, Danny. Thank you. Amy?
Hi, thank you so much, Josh, for inviting me here. I'm thrilled to be here. This is not my first WBC with the Phoenix Society. My first time was actually in 1998 with you and Dan down in Baltimore, and I've been to a couple since, but I'm really thrilled to be here as part of this panel. As you mentioned, and Dan, I think mentioned, I was a staff nurse and did take care of Dan when he came to us. And I spent several decades in the burn center as a staff nurse, then as the assistant nurse manager, and retired out several years ago as a nurse manager. But I do keep my hands in the burn community through the Phoenix Society, the American Burn Association, and I am on the board of directors for the Firefighters Foundation that supports the burn center at Nassau University where Dan was. And we'll get into a few more jokes, but Dan, I know you're not the best in math, and you did come to us in December of 1989, but it's easy enough to remember because I got married in 1990, and you went through that whole wedding planning journey with me when you were a patient. So very easy, 1990.
That's awesome.
I remember it well.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later with the video and all that. But anyway, again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to sharing our humor with you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. Hi, Mickey.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mickey Rathor. I'm a burn and trauma psychotherapist at Regents Hospital in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. I am really thankful to be here. I think this is a really valuable piece of recovery for many people at all the different stages. And during our time together, I have a few examples of kind of some different stages of recovery where we have used laughter and humor as a really wonderful healing piece of the journey. So happy to be here, and I'll give back to you, Josh.
All right, that's great. That's great. Thank you all again so much for being here. Thank you for taking part in this. And let's like start out, on a lighter note, Danny, with some of your reactions. For example, you get a lot, the what happened to you when you walk into a room or a bar or whatever. And I know you've got a whole list of, it's almost like what was that movie?
Yeah.
Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he goes through the list, Terminator, right?
The top, David Letterman, top 10.
Top 10.
Top 10 I have to come up with 10. I think I have about 5. But it stems from people coming up to me, and it could be a bar, it could be a restaurant. Mostly it's bars because, well, that's where I live. That's my hangout. So, but you have some people coming up, and some people are very nice and considerate, and they'll come up and, oh, my brother's in a wheelchair. I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're out. And I'll tell them the real story. And then you have the guy coming up, hey, what happened to you? And then I'm going to come up with an answer. And one of them is, I stole bread in Malaysia. You think I would have learned after the first 3 times? Or I was working in a deli, had a rough time with the deli slicer. So I try to come up with doing. I was roasting marshmallows, the things we do for s'mores, Let's say when they tell you to keep your hands and feet inside the bus, you do it, mister. I was laying out in the sun. Next time I'll use a higher SPF. So things like that. I try to keep it fresh.
That's great. And
go ahead.
What about the really drunk, obnoxious guy? The when you fire back, I don't want to steal your line, but when someone says, does the drunk thing and says, what the hell happened to you?
And I go, what happened to me? What happened to you? Look at you. Gosh,
yeah, that's my favorite. So okay, so let's talk about a few of the things to ease into the medical and the mental health. So what's going on there, right? You know, Danny is, you know, he stands out, right? The burn survivor stands out, and I note from my personal observations that when people talk to Danny and he starts to joke around with them, they've relayed to me that they sort of stop seeing the scars and the other evidences of the burn. He goes from being the burn survivor in the room to being Dan. He's comfortable enough in his new skin that he's able to joke around. He's able to set people at ease. It takes the elephant out of the room. And again, he's not always you know, getting raucous laughter. There are hits and misses, right, Dan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Are there
Definitely.
there are times that your humor?
Yeah. Well, I say everyone has a different type of humor, and sometimes things I say can be pretty dark. And you know, one time my mom was dealing with a sick husband, my stepfather Howie, and you know, she said, "We're thinking about cremation. What are your thoughts on cremation?" I said, "I tried it once. I didn't care for it." So some people love it. It was one of my favorites.
That fell flat with Annie.
Yeah, but Annie loved it. Annie's a good artist. She's a great artist.
Yeah.
But
I've
you know,
got
some people are offended by it. It's not their type of humor. It's a little too dark. So there's some things they do fall flat, and it's like, well, I liked it, but not good for you, right?
But humor is a hidden power, actually. It really is. And I think you articulated that pretty well, Josh. I mean, you know, this whole introduction. It's a hidden power. It's super healing, because what happens is laughter, it releases endorphins in the brain. And when you laugh, you reduce your stress hormones, it reduces the cortisol, it reduces blood pressure, and it has all those healing powers that we need to heal. You know,
I'm so glad. I'm going to jump in. I'm so glad you mentioned hormones.
Right ahead.
The hormones act as neurotransmitters, right?
Yeah.
The cortisol is the stress hormone. There are four hormones that are called the happy hormones. And the endorphins one is the one that actually provides us with pain relief. So I'm so glad you jumped in on that one, Amy, given that you're coming at this from the medical perspective. Legitimate, actual pain release occurs when people laugh, which is incredible.
It is.
Homework. Wow.
Listen, he is a lawyer. He had to study, you know.
I had to study up. I knew there would be a test. I actually have my own Granny Annie story, my mom, which I told last time, which I think kind of, from my perspective, goes a little afield from burn survivors, but I think it's relevant. I was visiting her and she was driving me nuts because she's a Jewish mother from Florida and that's what they do. And I got so stressed out that I literally thought I was having a heart attack. And I went into the emergency room and I said to the guy, "I think I'm having a heart attack. I have two young boys. I don't want to die." And he looked at me, he said, "So don't." And I laughed and it took the tension out of the situation. I don't know if it was the endorphins or one of the other three happy hormones, which are serotonin, dopamine, or oxytocin, which is another beauty, which we'll get to in a little while. But you're absolutely right. There's an actual physical reaction that I'm sure you've observed.
Absolutely. I mean, Dan, can you tell us a little bit about when you were first there and you were still on those medicated drips and you were having those hallucinations with your buddies there and some of those things that went on?
It was interesting. I was on heavy doses of morphine. You know, like I said, it was touch and go early, and I was on this bed that, you know, had the air bed and moved me around and made me hallucinate even more. So I was tripping. Man. And some of the hallucinations I had a sword in my back. I felt like, you know, it was an itch or something, but I felt like there was an actual sword in my back. And two of my buddies were there because it was only two at a time, strict rules. And I said to the guys, "Take the sword out of my back." And one guy said, "What do you mean? What sword? What are you talking about, sword?" I said, "The sword that's in my back. Like, you don't see the sword that's in my back? I'm feeling it." So the other guy said, "Just take the sword out of his back, the imaginary sword. Take it out of his back." And that's what happened. And there was one time, Butch, who was the head nurse before Amy became the head nurse, right?
Yeah, so let's clarify that. Yeah.
Yes. Butch was there, and Butch is a, kind of a big guy. And my mom was in the room, and I had the vision of Butch was tossing my mom around. Hey, Butch, stop tossing my mom around. What?
Yeah.
You're out to lunch. But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Amy,
And
have you observed, whether it's Danny or other patients, are there like examples of where you've seen humor in action and you've seen the effect?
absolutely. Now, you did reference that, for those maybe beginning their journey and such, it might not be appropriate. And myself and the staff really had to evaluate patients for where they were at, for how humorous we could be with them. And some we were able to read right away. And my nurses just got to joking, because I had quite a handful of nurses that were really good jokesters. And then there were other patients that, that were beginning their journey. So, but we know, as we talked about earlier, those hormones that get released help fight infection and help increase circulation. So we would want to get those patients to at least smile and chuckle a little. So let's just say it was a patient's birthday and they happen to be in the hospital. So my staff and I, we would get funny hats on, we'd have our scrubs on, our masks, and we would go into the patient's room and do a little song and dance for them. Now, we were all off key because we all have terrible singing voices. We do a little tap dance for them, and we would get a little chuckle out of them. And just that little chuckle is enough to just momentarily have them forget about what they're going through.
Right.
Another example is if they were there, say, on Halloween. We had a couple of doctors who were quite humorous, Dr. Rena being one of them. And we made fun of him a lot. So one year, one of my nurses dressed up as Dr. Rena, and the two of them rounded together at the bedsides. And the patients were just hysterical because the nurse's costume really looked like him, although you knew it wasn't him. And it just, you have to be really aware of where the patient is and what kind of humor they're ready for.
Right.
So we would really, really gauge that. So, doing our song and dance, our little tap for them and their happy birthday off key, or whether it was Halloween, or really pulling some practical jokes if they did, or joking around with a patient like Danny. He referenced his joke about being 6 foot and now he's lost 2 feet. We'd be pulling him up in that specialty bed that made him hallucinate. And I'd be like, oh, I have to go get somebody to help me. And he's like, why? I'm half the man I used to be, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, you knew the kind of patient that you could joke like that with.
Sure, you have to know your audience, right? Yeah. There's one I have from physical therapy. It's a little inappropriate, but that's who I am. Yeah. So they came around, just mentioned rounds, it made me think of it. Yeah. Dr. Friedman was in charge of rehab, and all the nurses and doctors and physical therapists would follow him and not say a word. And my physical therapist at the time happened to be a nun, Sister Mary. So I was walking around, new to walking, and I'm using my crutches. So I have crutches that are form-fitted to my arms, and I'm leaned over. So he said, we have to do something to get him more erect. And I said, talk about the wrong person for the job. I mean, come on. I thought the joke fell flat because nobody laughed. And then he went down the hall, and they all came up. That was really good. They didn't want to say it. They didn't want to laugh in front of him, but
that's great, Dan. That's great. Yeah, because Amy, obviously when you're doing debridement procedures and prepping people for surgeries and whatnot, it's obviously incredibly dark times for them, and just to have that attempt at levity to. But I'm very curious, and actually James Bosch, who unfortunately is no longer with us, may he rest in peace, mentioned something at our last session, which really struck me. And it was towards the end of the session. We didn't really have an opportunity to develop it, but what he said is that in terms of the timeline, is that each burn survivor, is on a different timeline in terms of their willingness, their ability to laugh, and the word that he used that I thought was so poignant was they need to reach a point where they give themselves permission to laugh. They're comfortable enough in their own skin that it's okay to laugh. And Mickey, maybe that's a segue into the subtext of what's really going on with the burn survivor, and how do we assist? How do we get them move them from the, the initial period where they're unable to laugh, understandably, move them towards that. Okay, it's okay to make light, to have some levity, to balance out all of the difficult things that are going on.
Yes, I mean, James said it best, I think, in that there are two different kinds of humor. There's negative humor and positive humor, and you guys are hearing Danny, and he tends to lean towards more the negative, which is like the self-defeating or making fun of yourself, but with the purpose as connection, like that it's not it's not putting someone down, it's sharing of yourself in a self kind of defeating way, but in a way with a purpose to connect. There's also positive humor, which is kind of more what Amy was talking about with the dressing up, on Halloween, and just kind of funny jokes that just make you just can't help but laugh and get the giggles, And so I think at any stage during recovery from a burn injury, I think it's so important for us who work in hospital settings and even in outpatient settings to do just exactly what James had talked about, was to give permission, because it does all those things. It releases those endorphins that make you feel happy and do all these amazing, wonderful things to our bodies. And I have an example of a situation where we use humor in the hospital. It's actually a patient who's been with us for several months. He is a pediatric burn, significantly injured. And after our very first really emotional, difficult family meeting where they were given a lot of bad news, the doctor had left the meeting and I was just sitting around talking with the family, and they shared this kind of funny story about their loved one. And we were all laughing so hard that you couldn't tell what the tears were from the crying of the news the doctor had shared and what was from the laughing. So later I went and met with the family just to check in to see how they were doing. And they commented how amazing it felt to end our time together laughing. And so I said, can we carve out some time at the end of every family meeting to just talk about something funny? So we have done that every week. And sometimes it's about like the aunt who took the kids climbing and they were on some PlayStation to bed and the police got called. And we were laughing so hard, people were like, what's going on in there? So I think even in the acute setting, there is a time and place for it. And Amy, commented on one of those too. But I think it's in the permission piece. I heard James talk last year, and I said that, and I say that a lot more now with families, is like, it's okay to feel joy. It's okay to be happy. If you laugh, that doesn't make what you're going through any less hard.
Right. It's funny, and it's not just limited to the burn survivor. It's limited, it's for the family members, the supporters, the staff, the healers. I hosted something last year at the virtual World Burn Congress for survivors' families. It was a session that I ran for parents and brothers and whatnot of survivors. And towards the end of the session, I told them that we were about to do a healing power of laughter session. And what did you guys all think about that? And all of a sudden, the whole Zoom room lit up. Everybody wanted to tell their funny story. Everybody had a thing where their kid calls himself the crispy critter, or everyone had some funny thing to say, but they were all kind of holding it in, I think. And I would love to see people at World Burn Congress this year, not being afraid to tell something funny about their own experience, not being afraid that they're going to offend somebody. We're all kind of in this boat together. The ties that bind us here, and we all have funny things to say. And I think we all need permission to feel, obviously not in a hurtful way, right? You talked about that, Mickey, positive versus negative humor. But Danny's negative, just to be clear, because he's self-deprecating, doesn't mean he's mean-spirited or making fun of others or anything that obviously would be inappropriate, right? He's at the point where he's comfortable enough in his new skin that he can, to do something in a self-deprecating way. But that doesn't mean he's being mean-spirited or offensive. So I'd love it, if this year at National Harbor if we all, you know, were free to tell our funny stories, not just in this kind of seminar, but throughout the week, and share those kinds of experiences, because I think it brings a whole other level of healing, you know, whether that's you know, one of the 4 happy hormones or not. And Mickey, I wanted to jump in on the oxytocin hormone, because that's the bonding one. That's the happy hormone, or they call it the love hormone. It's actually very prevalent in pregnancies and whatnot. Oxytocin release brings us together. And James said, you know, he talked about mirror neurons, that the person who tells the joke is having as good a time as the person who's receiving the joke, and their neurons are firing together. So there's a connection there. And I think that's part of you know, Danny's gift, and letting the elephant out of the room is making that connection. So thank you for that. Any other stories you want to share, Mickey?
Yeah, I have another one that's kind of, you know, it's another one for a family. So this came up at our burn camp, and it was a room filled with parents of pediatric burn survivors sharing their stories. And it was very heavy. It was very emotional. And then we got to one of the dads who was in a house fire with his 3 daughters. And he opened with, I mean, people are still kind of wiping their tears. He opened with, you know, I went on this golf outing. He goes on to talk about they've been doing it for 20 years, and every guy was getting up to the tee box and shanking it, terrible. Every guy would say, great job. Gosh, that was a great hit. That was a great hit. So after, you know, a couple holes of this, he leaned to his buddy and said, just watch this next. So the next guy gets up, has a terrible hit. And he goes, that sucked. That was a terrible hit. And we all just start laughing. So it was so powerful. And then the beauty of it was his story was, it's okay to not be okay. Like it was in this room full of people who were really emotional. And I have used that kind of type of humor in so many ways of like, you can make something lighthearted and then also have it be a message of like Danny does, like, I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be fine. Like like you can use both negative and positive humor in a way to relate to people, to validate, to show empathy. You know, they say that cortisol is in our body, and empathy and endorphins are like best friends. And so I think just to remember that it can be it can come out in lots of different ways with the same end product of people feeling connected, people feeling joy, and people's, you know, intensity of their difficult emotions going down while the endorphins of joy going up.
Yeah, and difficult emotions, I think, includes combating fear is one of the things that we had touched on. And I'm sure you guys see that all the time, that, you know, a humor is an attempt to put a brave face on something that's about to happen or is happening, is very difficult, right? And it's a coping mechanism. And I'm sure Danny, you know, used that. And I'm sure, Amy, you saw Danny and many others using that, you know, on their way into difficult procedures or whatnot, right?
Sure. Yeah. I had a physical therapist come out and do a report on me, and he didn't believe that I was as positive as it was. You said I use it as a defense, which definitely laughter, comedy is a definite defense. It's a coping mechanism. It's how we grew up. We had a dad who, you know, who's tough on us. So we use comedy a lot as a defense, and he was very funny. So was my mom. They're both slightly crazy, so it made for a funny household. But it was definitely a defense mechanism, and it's a coping mechanism too. Yeah, without a doubt. But
it made for an interesting group at the burn center.
Yeah, baby.
It made for an interesting group at the burn center, the Gropper family.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Gropper family. Hey.
You know, Josh, you mentioned, you know, going into difficult procedures and such. And I know Dan, he'll let me share this story. He used to have to go into the hydrotherapy tank every day, you know, whether it was for debridement or after the skin grafting to get him cleaned up. And depending on what part of his journey he was in, he might have had 2 or 3 IV lines and a Foley catheter and a feeding tube. And getting a patient, you know, from a nursing perspective and a care perspective is a little bit challenging. So we'd get Danny on the stretcher and
go ahead. Yeah.
get all your lines and everything, and we get him into the hydrotherapy tank room and finally into the tank, and he, you know, I'd send everybody away, and Eileen, the nurse's aide, and I would be in there, just two of us, and now he's like, oh, you forgot my rubber ducky. And it's like, your rubber ducky, you couldn't tell us while we're now dripping in sweat, we're all garbed up, and now we got to get somebody to fetch your rubber ducky.
I mean, I was a young boy at the time. I needed my rubber ducky. I
You weren't that young.
Basketball. Yeah.
Yes, he needed his hoops also. That was another time. He was like, go get my hoops. I'm like, your hoops? I didn't know that had come into play. And yeah, so him using his humor then on us. And you know,
I was still a bowler even then.
Yeah. But yes, you and your rubber ducky.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Dan, I know you get a lot of people who think when they see you that maybe you served in the military. Those are usually good setups for you when someone comes over and thanks you for your service, right?
Yeah. What branch in the military? I said, oh, Salvation Army. And a lot of the times they don't get it. What? Giving out those used t-shirts, traumatic. A PTSD from that. Oh, that was rough. I worked at Old Navy. I could work for Merchant Marine. Any type of the.
Yeah.
So that's just the assumption. I get a lot of, oh, poor guy, and I'm like, my life is better than yours. Are you kidding me? I do a lot. I'm golfing. I'm out at concerts. I'm traveling. I have a lot of friends. Go out to great restaurants. Don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for yourself. But like, I thought my life was bad. Well, your life is pretty bad. I won't say.
I always tell people that others who might have had the same injury and incident befall them might be shut-ins, but you're the opposite. You're the go out. You're constantly on the move and at concerts and traveling the country and the world and experiencing life, and God bless you for that. That you're so comfortable that you don't let anything stop you. We love that about you.
Did anything? I gotta ask Dan. Do you have any stories for us from your time up in Saratoga this summer?
The spa.
Yes.
Only losing stories. No. Nothing too crazy. It was fun. We had our usual band of misfits.
Yes.
So it's getting. I found out Saratoga is going to host the Belmont Stakes maybe next year and definitely the year after. So redoing Belmont. So that's on a bucket list. We're going.
All right. No bar fights or anything this year.
No bar fights. No bar fights. Yeah, it was a one time years and years ago where we were in front of this place, Ciro's, and Ciro's is very hoity-toity, a lot of blazers and owners and trainers and people who are just have a lot of money. And then there's us, me and my meathead crew, and one of my friends, Billy, tuned up, and he starts charging me like a rhino, and we're hitting into each other, and people gathered around, thought it was a real fight. Like, go ahead, get him, you can do it. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, I'm on it. But nothing like, we've grown up, not really. Okay. And the same guy, I got him a shirt this year that said, I like horse racing, beers, and maybe 3 people. And he filled it out nicely, and so many people love that shirt, and it's pretty true. If you know the guy, it's pretty spot on with him. So people got a kick out of that this year.
Awesome. All right. Amy, Mickey, anyone, any other war stories or points that you want to make before we wrap up?
No, I just, like you mentioned earlier, and we've talked about, everyone is at different parts of their journey, and just to put a smile on somebody's face, get a little chuckle out of them. And for the folks that are here, if you mentioned, if you're not there yet, we're recording this so that when you are ready, you can watch it. And we hope that those that are here have enjoyed it. And I encourage the folks who might be staying through the end of the WBC to make sure, if they want to continue the laughter at the end, is to go to the dance party, because
floor.
we've been out on that dance floor, Dan, and I encourage
So
folks
much-
because you will continue with the laughter just watching folks out on the dance floor at that dance party. So
And catch us after hours for the X-rated version of our session. We have more inappropriate stories after hours.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Mickey, anything else?
Yeah, the last thing I just would say is I think there are different, coping strategies that we have and that we use to get through hard things in life. And some of them are problem focused, some of them are meaning focused, some of them are support seeking, and some of them are emotion focused. And I think humor falls under the emotion focused. And so when we talk about what stage you're at, I think to think about, where am I? Am I going to meaning? Am I wanting to focus on the problem? And if you're ready for humor, it's one of the best ones. I think it's one of the ones that you can tap into wherever you are in your lives, whether you're in the hospital, you're in rehab, you're home, you're 10 years out, you're 20 years out, you're 40 years out. Like, you can always tap into that emotion focus, which is the humor that, it reduces that stress hormone and increases joy.
Excellent. Excellent. So, I guess, Dan, unless you got a couple other one-liners for us, I can do some wrap up of takeaways. But if I didn't get to a portion of your routine, forgive me.
Yeah. When people ask me, do I smoke? So I smoked a house one time. That's, one of those. I'll give you that one. Another one, I'm doing this, I'm on this disability council for Nassau County, and they were talking about sign language, and we have to get sign language going. I said, I failed out of sign language school. Get that one. And I'll give a few more at the live session, but
all right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the banter and the connections that we made with the new group. I think it's a stellar cast that we have assembled here. I'm looking forward to the live at the World Burn Congress. And just to reiterate a couple of the key points that we wanted to make, humor can be used as a tool to take the elephant out of the room, to make people feel at ease, right? It's a bonding technique between the joke teller and the joke receiver. There's a connection, a hormonal connection being made there. It can be used not only for joy and feeling good and pleasure, but actually relieving pain, relieving stress. Those are actual things that occur with humor. And as long as you keep it light and helpful and not harmful, again, whether you're self-deprecating or you're just being silly, as long as it's not mean-spirited and you're making fun of somebody else, it's an incredible tool. It's a gift. It's a gift that comes more naturally to Danny than others. But like Danny said, it's not about how funny you are. You don't have to be have great comic timing. You can just try to joke around, and that in and of itself will make people feel more comfortable and will release those same hormones in you that they're released in Danny and the people whose lives he touches. So we would urge you to embrace it and give yourself that permission to laugh and to, like Mickey and Amy have been talking about, bring some joy into what's otherwise a difficult situation. There's no reason you can't have both. And that's unless anyone else has anything to add, I think that's about it for the session.